But they always show up. They're wonderful people.
But
you just don't want to get too
there
close
is
to
some
home.
very, very scientifically sophisticated and dissent, and it needs to be heard as part of the discussion. The other thing I'd say is that I think many of the policy and cultural magazines, they sense but don't entirely recognize why this issue is important to everything else they care about. The Wall Street Journal had a great cartoon a little while ago in their Salt and Pepper cartoon, that they do on the op-ed page, and it was a hapless guy before a judge, and he says, "Not guilty by reason of millions of years of evolutionary selection for aggressive behavior, Your Honor." And it's a funny cartoon, but actually, I went back and looked at this. The first instance of what's called the diminished responsibility plea, I did it because I was insane, was actually made by Clarence Darrow in 1924 in the famous Leopold and Loeb case, the thriller murder case. Two young University of Chicago college students killed a 12-year-old boy for the thrill of it to show their independence from bourgeois morality. And they were convicted. At the point of sentencing, the ACLU sent out Darrow, and he argued that, yes, they did have defective moral machinery, but they had such defective moral machinery because they were the product of an unguided, undirected, mindless evolutionary process.
All right, so have you seen this cartoon from the Wall Street Journal?
I haven't, no.
Oh, it's wild.
Yeah.
This defendant's in court, right? And pleads not guilty.
Okay, pretty standard.
Yeah, but get this, his reason. Millions of years of evolutionary selection for aggressive behavior. I mean, can you even imagine?
Wow, that's creative.
It's hilarious, but also kind of makes you think, right? Like, can we blame everything on evolution?
Yeah.
Is Darwin's whole idea enough to explain all of human behavior?
Yeah.
Especially stuff like morality, being good or bad.
It definitely brings up this huge question that's been debated forever. How much of who we are, the choices we make, is really down to our evolutionary past?
Exactly. So today, we're doing a deep dive into this whole thing, evolution, morality, all that. And we've got some interesting sources to pick apart.
Lay it on me.
Well, first, there's that cartoon, obviously. But then, there's this super famous legal case, Leopold and Loeb. You familiar with it?
Oh, yeah, early 1900s, right. Two young guys, pretty horrific crime.
Yeah, exactly. They kidnapped and murdered a teenager just because they thought they were smart enough to get away with it. Super messed up.
I remember it being really controversial, especially the defense their lawyer used.
Oh, absolutely. So their lawyer was Clarence Darrow, huge name at the time. And his whole defense was basically they're not fully responsible because evolution made them do it.
Ah, so he tapped into that whole nature versus nurture debate.
Big time. He claimed they had this defective moral machinery because of, and I quote, the unguided evolutionary process.
Yeah.
It's like he was saying their bad genes or whatever were the real culprit.
Fascinating and incredibly controversial, I bet. It completely challenges this idea of free will, right? Like, if we're just products of evolution, can we really be held accountable for our actions?
That's the million-dollar question. And it brings up huge implications for, well, everything. Our justice system, how we punish crime, even just how we view each other.
No kidding. I mean, think about it. If you take that argument to its logical extreme, does evolution become a get-out-of-jail-free card?
Exactly. And then how do we deal with, like, rehabilitation or even just personal responsibility? If it's all in our genes, what's the point of trying to change?
Well, and that's where things get really complex because we can't just ignore what science tells us. There is evidence that genetics, our environment, all of that plays a role in shaping behavior.
So how do we square that with holding people accountable? Where's the line between nature and nurture?
Yeah, it's a massive balancing act. And there are no easy answers. But you see this playing out in courts today all the time. Like, lawyers will bring in experts to talk about a defendant's childhood trauma or maybe genetic predispositions towards certain behaviors.
So are we saying that stuff should excuse them from consequences?
Not necessarily. It's more about understanding the context, the full picture. Like, maybe someone who committed a violent crime had a brain injury that affects impulse control. That doesn't mean they're off the hook, but it could impact sentencing or the kind of treatment they receive in prison.
So basically, it's not as simple as evolution made me do it,
Yeah.
but it's also not ignoring the science.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole topic so fascinating and so tricky, because it forces us to confront some really fundamental questions about what it means to be human.
Like, do we actually have free will? Or are we just playing out a script that was written by our genes and our experiences?
Deep stuff, right. Philosophers have been debating this for centuries. But Darwin's theory definitely throws some fuel on that fire. And honestly, the more we learn about genetics, neuroscience, all that, the more complicated these questions become.
I gotta say, this deep dive is giving me a bit of an existential crisis.
Well, welcome to the club. But I think that's kind of the point, isn't it? This stuff makes us think critically, maybe question some assumptions we've always held about ourselves, about right and wrong, about justice.
That's got to be a good thing, right? Even if there aren't easy answers, at least we're asking the questions.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe someday, as we keep learning, we'll come up with some new answers, or at least new ways of thinking about these really complex issues.
Well, on that note, I think we've given everyone a lot to chew on. What do you think? Do you feel like you're in control of your destiny, or are you just a product of your biology? Head over to our website, let us know what you think, and let's keep this conversation going.
Always happy to spark a good debate.
That's what we're here for. Until next time, folks.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.